Red Fanon. You will see that in a time of helplessness, murderous rampage is the collective unconscious of the colonized. Hello everyone, my name is Eric. I'm a limited licensed master social worker and psychotherapist. I've been working with children, youth, and adults for 10 years. On this week's episode of So You Want to Learn Psychology, we're going to be taking a look at Frantz Fanon's famous work, The Wretched of the Earth. In a time of growing political unrest, what can sometimes clarify our own ideas and values about violence, oppression, and government in general is to try to understand the purely psychological aspects at play and purposefully separate ourselves from their worldly context. This is not going to be a video about what happened. This is simply going to be an examination of what we're seeing and how we got here. Fanon was a French West Indian psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. His expertise was in working with oppressed peoples, and specifically those affected by the wave of colonialism that swept through Asia and Africa in the early 1900s. The book, The Wretched of the Earth, is about the psychology of oppressed people and how, despite our Christian morals, like love thy neighbor and turn the other cheek, the only real thing we can do in the face of violence is react with violence. If we ever want to break the chains of oppression, that is. Fanon writes, "For the last can be the first only after a murderous and decisive confrontation between the two protagonists. The determination to have the last move up to the front, to have them clamber up, too quickly some say, the famous echelons of an organized society can only succeed by resorting to every means, including, of course, violence." You might think that upon reading this book, Fanon is a proponent of violence, and you'd be right. I bet that doesn't sit right with you either. I bet you think to yourself, well, violence is wrong. We can solve political issues without violence, surely. And that is just the problem in and of itself. You are thinking and using your higher morals and higher values to attempt to solve problems without violence. It's a commendable endeavor. The problem is, your opposition is not. Your opposition uses violence as their primary tactic. Your opposition are the ones with the bulletproof vests, the pepper sprays, and the handguns, and whatever other violent means they currently have at their disposal. And the worst part about it is that you believe these people are on your side, when in reality, they would just as quickly turn you into a stain on the sidewalk if it means keeping their job. It's an incredibly sad state of affairs, but it is enlightening to recognize that the power belongs to the majority, and in our enlightened and rational day and age, the majority has been reduced to a passive conglomeration of small groups with conflicting value systems, rather than a large majority group sharing one idea: liberation. Jung once said that the need for an increased government satisfies the psychological and pathological desire to be taken care of. In the same sense that we desire to remain infantile, to wish that our parents could live forever and be there for us like they were when we were children, we inevitably have to replace our parents with our governmental institutions. Out of them, we expect to be taken care of. We expect health care. We expect financial stability. We expect clean water and cheap food, none of which the government really has the ability to provide us with in reality. Our healthcare is unaffordable, we're virtually all struggling financially, our water is contaminated daily, and our food makes us sick, and, in a morbid twist of fate, even costs us more than it did before. The price of McDonald's has only gone up, and I assure you that it's not because they're using higher quality ingredients. The government is simply made up of individuals who, in actuality, have very little power to take care of the masses, despite our fanciful beliefs. Fanon would agree, but from a different perspective. He emphasized that the infantilizing nature of this belief in the need for the government when he wrote, "In order to arrive at this notion of party, we must first and foremost rid ourselves of the very Western, very bourgeois, and hence very disparaging idea that the masses are incapable of governing themselves." Are we really so delusional to believe that our civility, our good nature towards others, is something strictly upheld by our institutions, Or are we capable of living pro-social lives without politics? I think that the reason we believe that it wouldn't be possible is because the people whose job it is to keep the peace have convinced you that you need them. In reality, their entire life demands that you surrender to this belief. In reality, we don't actually need news anchors, late-night hosts, or online political analysts just as much as we don't need Twitch streamers, YouTubers, or baseball players. These institutions are absolutely meaningless once you recognize that you're an adult and you can live your life responsibly according to your own values, and you don't have to simply follow someone else's orders to remain peaceful. These institutions exist on a shaky ground. Every political party exists solely on the rocky foundation that, for some reason, it is necessary for them to exist, when in reality, it isn't. Here is a bit of a content warning for the next minute or two of the video. I normally wouldn't do something like this, but I feel like it's appropriate here because while this is supposed to be a video about the book and a specific topic, real life inevitably bleeds into our purely intellectual analysis with the sheer force of its relevance. I want you to consider your own thoughts, feelings, and reactions to what happened in Minnesota 2 weeks ago. Were you disgusted? Were you angry? Were you annoyed? Upset? Were you smugly excited? Were you finding reasons to justify what happened? Whose side were you on? Just think about it. And now, I'd like you to think about how all those thoughts and feelings would change if the roles were reversed and the context were erased. How would you have reacted if it was the woman standing in the street and shot an officer who was attempting to drive away? How would a simple swap of placement alter your perception of the overall event? Would there be justification? Would you be upset? Would you have condemned both situations equally? Let's continue. The colonized man liberates himself in and through violence. This practice enlightens him because it provides him with a means to an end. Our states and governments are fundamentally violent organizations. They appear to us to be benevolent because, thankfully, we don't have obvious transgressions of individual and collective rights happening every day. But we're not the world's top spender on arms and armies for no reason. It's kind of like how Jordan Peterson says to be strong, you have to be dangerous, but you have to know how to control yourself. That's true. And that's the position of our governmental bodies, unconsciously to most of us. They are ready to be violent at the press of a button or at the signing of an executive order. It's simply a miracle based on faith that most of our days go by without major incidents of governmentally sanctioned violence within our own country. Of course, most of us are not naive to the fact that our government funds and enacts violence across the world every day. But at least in our country, the white majority of us are basically free from violence. We only experience the benevolent aspects of our government, the stimulus checks, the reductions in gas prices, you know, the important stuff. The biggest psychological problem we face is that of collective projection. We're falling victim to the illusion that the left is full of evil, Satan-worshipping communists, or that the right is full of evil, crusading Christians determined to eradicate anything non-traditional. I mean, this is true to some degree, although generally not evil in any sense of the word. People throw around the term so carelessly nowadays that anytime anyone describes anything else as evil, you can pretty reliably diagnose them as politically or ideologically possessed. We have, for the most part, a group of people on the left who want our individual and collective rights to expand, and a group on the right who want to reduce our individual and collective rights to specifically the non-poor, white, heterosexual Americans. I'm not making a negative judgment against either group. I'm simply telling you what I observe and what you can probably observe too. This division is so problematic because it relies on our psychological mechanism of projection to displace our own emotions and attribute them to the other group. As any psychologist would attest, there are undoubtedly violent tendencies in every human, in every group of humans. The shadow in Jungian terms, but the ends to which violence is used as a means is different for these groups of people. One, the ones already in power, use violence to maintain control of their deteriorating system, and other use violence to protect themselves from being trampled by their oppressive government. Which group is justified in using violence? That's up to you. The moral of this story, the thesis of this book, is that violence is the mechanism by which our entire world expresses its power. This isn't some theory, this is reality. If there is a red thread running through the entire world history, it is a violent one. If violence is justifiable at all, then it must be justified for everyone who chooses it as a means to an end. Our government is a violent institution, and that shouldn't be a controversial opinion. So, what do you do when you begin to feel tensions ramping up? When the military starts to come into your cities, knock on your doors, and arrest your community members with no regard for human dignity or decency? We may not be there yet, but if we continue to wait around until it is happening every day, well, by then it will be already too late. You can talk about anything you like, but when it comes to talking about the one thing in a man's life that involves opening up new horizons, enlightening your country, and standing tall alongside your own people, then muscle power is required. The collective struggle presupposes a collective responsibility from the rank and file and the collegial responsibility at the top. Yes, everyone must be involved in the struggle for the sake of the common salvation. There are no clean hands, no innocent bystanders. We are all in the process of dirtying our hands in the quagmire of our soil and the terrifying void of our minds. Any bystander is a coward or a traitor. There will come a time when you have to choose a side. It will be up to you to decide what you stand for and who you stand with. I make no reservations about humanity. I know that there will always be someone who is opposed to me, and so I have no illusions about the prospect of world peace, or even within my own country for that matter. Peace, as far as I've observed, is not a long-standing condition for the human race, and so I can only realistically imagine a world in which fighting for what you believe in is the highest moral attitude. In some cases, that means using violence to protect what you believe in. That concludes this episode of So You Want to Learn Psychology? I hope you enjoyed. We'll be back next week with another episode, probably not one so controversial, but definitely still relevant. I know many people watching this video will have all kinds of opinions, and I'd love to hear them in the comments. As always, thank you for your support. Until next time.